Well, I have the wrong format up. We're already here, so let's get started anyway.
Howdy.
So recently, and just now, like literally seconds ago, I finished watching the end of this video, Big Nuclear, Big Mistake.
In my many travels, I've learned.
So the idea of linear no threshold, summarized as he would put it, is that first of all, it assumes that in the practices of nuclear regulatory systems that there is no safe limit, which is not how it's actually practiced. There is obviously a safe limit. Um, so there's already a threshold. So there's anyone working in a nuclear power plant or in places like Chernobyl or whatever else, or places with high background radiation, um, you can end up with certain amounts. Background radiation is wrong to state because it's not the same as high frequency um, neutrinos or neutrons or high frequency like specific radiation of that type. The radiation type of, for example, microwaves or whatever else is different than that of stuff like radium and um, obviously uranium, thorium, and such.
Out of over 2,300 cases of radium dial painters studied, there were only 96 cancers identified. That's, of course, 96 too many. And this was indeed a tragedy of workplace conditions and safety regulations that needed to be told. But that number is still just 4%. What I could have said is that despite the significant body burden of thousands of radium girls, the vast majority of them, 96%, had no health effects at all. And as we
Okay, I'm gonna have to cancel you right now because saying at all as a science communicator is a mistake. Just a general don't do that. Because those cases could have been there are all sorts of ways that the uranium girls with the radioactive paint and the clocks, watches, whatever. Um, the stuff that they were dealing with can have effects that clearly could have been overlooked or were not seen as the cause of, for example, a cancer, but it could have led to liver disease or whatever other situations, not exactly related to cancer, but related to like the general system being overloaded or there's a lot more things that radiation can do to just give you cancer. I'm really finding it hard to say that this is okay at all. Like this is outrageous that he would say this. And it's the thing that prompted my video. I don't need anything else to be bothered about in this video.
was indeed a tragedy of workplace conditions and safety regulations that needed to be told. But that number is still just 4%. What I could have said is that despite the significant body burden of thousands of radium girls, the vast majority of them, 96%, had no health effects at all. And as we
Okay, so no health effects at all means not just not just only thinking about cancers, but any other type of effect whatsoever. Because, for whatever reason, when dealing with radioactive materials, the amount of stuff that they were exposed to, direct exposures, or maybe like the ones who got cancers maybe had the paint get into a cut on their finger or something, and they ingested something, or breathed in something, or whatever else, which can obviously make things a lot worse. The idea that there was no health side effects just without having seen. Well, there is no evidence given in this video, and there will be no evidence in my video, but because I'm not going to look into that. But, well, not today, not right now. I need to sleep. But the point is, it's shocking, alarming, and it doesn't make sense that there would be nothing. There could be microscopic stuff which is obviously like the small amounts of concerns and issues that can happen for whatever reason. And they're saying, or he is saying, that for a majority of them, over 2,000 people just did not have any health side effects whatsoever from dealing with uranium for a long period of time. How many people blow out of proportions? This is a risky thing to make. Annoys me how many sources blow out of proportions used for 4%. Sure, marketplace safety, workplace safety was bad, and that's not everyone's focus. Get a Kyle Hill ad in the middle of a Kyle Hill video is wild. Discussing hormesis with fellow pilots for years, and since we believe the highest exposed radiation reactors in the country, I mean, yeah, if you're out in a freaking plane, then your elevation and your closeness to cosmic radiation is the type of stuff that you would expect to have a lot of exposure to and to have a lot of issues with, and yet that is not, like, literally, that's, again, there's a problem that I have with that, and it's the type of radiation. For some reason, I always go back to the type of radiation must be some factor. Like, there was another statement, something about they didn't get exposed to radiation, they got exposed to heavy metals. And that itself is a different thing. And okay, that's something. I'm not going through all this video with you. The Alara idea as low as reasonably something. Don't make me look it up. What the other thing is, these numbers don't line up in a line like that. the line is different depending on where things are, and it's all counterwampy. There's that doesn't that this graph is useless to me technically. Um, with bits of information that absolutely just don't correlate with like the exact projected um, amount of chance of concerning cancers and stuff. It's not enough to say that.
What's clear from reading all the reports and studies I'm about to summarize is that many in the nuclear space are desperately trying to get the word out to the public about something they see as painfully obvious, and obviously painful. I was drawn to nuclear for this very reason. The science and the technology was, to me, so clearly misunderstood and unfairly maligned that it called out to me for better science communication. So, in that same spirit of honest evaluation and education, I'm trying to get their word out, because I do believe this has harmed and continues to harm the public in increasingly important ways. I trust my friends in the nuclear industry to know the line that I'm walking.
That yes to credit.
I trust my friends in the nuclear industry to know the line that I'm walking. Linear no threshold is a model that correlates effective radiation dose in human tissue with incidence of cancer. It is linear, which means starting from zero dose, any amount of radiation received proportionately increases the rate of cancer development. Less at low doses, more at higher doses. It has no threshold, distinguishing it from other models that only begin the relationship above a certain threshold of dose. In nuclear regulation and radiation protection,
This feels in and of itself to be a misunderstanding. That there already is an understood threshold. That this is somehow a problem that needs to be solved when in fact it's a problem that needs to be solved. No. It's already solved. You're going a step further. Something, something, something. The problems that I have is that when the reason why there's a no dose is too low idea, or at least that's what he thinks there is that when you consider the idea of what happens when you have a fast fast moving little piece of something, that bit of DNA can get messed up where it hits, and so you end up with even the smallest dose or burst of many strikes, leading to crazy issue in like your hand or something or whatever else. There's other things referring to cancer treatments and how if you just take into account the ideas of radiation dose be, in regards to the amount that you're expected at any given time per year translated into hours, and there's something about besides background radiation, which again, radiation that is of an energy spectrum is not the same as a high energy neutron. It's not the same type of radiation at all. Like radiation from your microwave is not the same type as from a nuclear reactor, not in the slightest. The same as the signals from your Wi-Fi tower. There's something in here where it talks about medical treatments. And where is this document?
Earth evolved under a selective pressure from natural radiation, and so part of that evolution was developing defense mechanisms for it. If an animal, like you with this genetic.
Okay, so generally, there are genetics stuff that can happen, and that will affect you in a localized area of your body. And that shouldn't affect your kids unless it affects the parts of your genetics that it's in the sperm specifically that ends up transmitting to the kid. So if you have stuff, say, in any other part of your body, chances are it won't transfer over if it just depends. And like this type of thing where the whole concept of a slight transformation and everything else leading on to other things down the line. Genetics have a way, as they are being read and how they are being multiplied, that there are certain things that will show up and express, and then there are other things that will express later. And it's crazy to think that there are naturally occurring nuclear sites where obviously there are uranium deposits somewhere, and so that will basically be able to leak into places and make potential problems. And the thing that happens possibly is that you have organisms that are small, then do that whole thing that we talked about with, or I mean, most people, I assume, understand the idea of mercury. That if there was a huge thing about the lower life forms on the food chain collectively eating the stuff that develops the collection of mercury, which then makes tuna into the most mercury dense bullshit that we can ever get. And you don't want to eat that unless you've, like, in certain doses, because you will not want a certain amount of mercury in your body for whatever reason. But a certain amount is fine. But apparently you eat that every day. It's considerably similar to any amount of toxic exposure, that it just builds up. Or it can do damage that then causes other things that happen. And if you continue damage in certain ways, certain places, depending on how it presents, depending on how the body metabolizes it, certain types, that's why this entire therapy, which includes, or prevention treatment, where you're given a certain non-radioactive version of the stuff that if you did ingest, then the radioactive part would get into your body and take that place. So if you have that, um, if you have that medication in you, then you're taking out the potential of becoming radioactive in those specific areas, developing problems. This is a known and it has been understood that you don't want to like breathe in these things and end up with that stuff. And if you do, you want a fair amount of the right stuff that is not radioactive to be in your body, so that the wrong stuff that is radioactive to not be in your body when you end up inhaling or whatever. So that is an understanding that if you leave that position for it to remain in your body, then that radiation is just going to be there and build up. So when you end up with things that are able to work with your body over time. Things that, yeah, you would consider like outside radiation is one thing. Inside radiation inside is considered to be a considered risk, a very important and very calculated. We understand how it works. We know how to cancel the potential of it happening because it's genuinely so dangerous. You're undermining that. You're not mentioning it. You're deliberately in this video, Kyle, not saying about that medication to prevent it. And I feel like that's a disservice to your cause, but not as much as I might think. Because, yeah, you might say, okay, well, there's no lower amount. The whole assumption of there being no lower limit is that there is, in fact, a lot of understanding about what happens when you get stuff that, like, if it gets into your bones, like with radioactive carbon for whatever reason, or whatever else materials, then that can be a problem, and that will be a source that is a problem that continues. And it all has to do with ingesting and inhalating and or inhaling and having it be a part of your body instead of just being shot with something from the outside. Like, I cannot express to you just how much, yeah, cosmic rays can do a certain amount, and yeah, with the person talking about the planes being a concern and the fact that there is no significant planes operators, like it's not just the pilots, it's anyone who operates any plane whatsoever. So all of the staff of the planes, the stewardesses. Obviously, pilots are going to be the ones who are there often. You would think stewardesses would have to be cycled out, but the pilots would be limited to the amount that they can cycle out. So there must be, if there is not as much concern because of that, like, usually don't receive rates, literally decades, and don't receive per annum. It's this whole thing is troublesome because there is genuine concern about how radiation, different types, specific types, and then literally there is a part where you say they didn't suffer from radiation, they suffered from metal poisoning? Like if you had gold or something. And it's like, yeah, that makes sense. That if there's a metal in you, that alone can cause chemical reactions and stuff and big poison type functions. The radiation itself is a different aspect. Now, I understand the reactivity chemically versus the energetic bombardments.
Risks can be more detrimental than underestimating them. Misinformation partially led to traumatic evacuations of about 200,000 individuals and an estimated 1,250 suicides. This is more than 10 times the high-end estimates for the number of excess thyroid cancers correlated with the disaster. And it got so much worse.
I don't want to talk about suicides. Those numbers are not relevant to the issue whatsoever. I'm going to be right cold with you. Telling someone to get out of their home because you believe that there is radiation or whatever else leading to suicide is a psychological issue. And as much as that is traumatic, it sucks. Fucking horrifying. 1,250 suicides is not something to be. Oh, but a much bigger thing is what's next to be said.
In the months following the explosion in Ukraine, pregnant women.
There's this whole thing about 100 to 200,000 elective abortions related to this. That's the part I want to focus on or would be concerned about. Because wanting to die instead of suffer the issues of radiation poisoning is rational. You don't want to experience that. Is there doing so based off of what was actually happening to them? Unclear. But that is a absolute psychological rational fear. Radiation exposed children is like you don't want to have them suffer. And that kind of pain, that kind of issues is like, yeah, no, totally can understand. People perceiving that kind of danger, you understand it's not for misinformation leading to that kind of thought. It's because there is danger. It's because there is suffering. And it's because that kind of person to like an individual case basis, you would make that choice, is what I believe anyone in their situation understands. So, if what you're trying to say is that the radiation that they would have experienced wouldn't have led to certain issues with their children to make them have who knows what kinds of issues, that concern doesn't exist. If you're trying to say that there wasn't enough reason for them to consider that as the choice that is necessary or best for the sake of the children? It's like, don't even let them suffer. Why would you? It's freaking scary. It's not just I still think that it's not just portrayed to be scary because it is meant, because there are some incidences here and there, like the freaking massive doses at the Demon Core incidents or whatever else. The backyard nuclear physicist or radium girls or the X-ray scientists. That lady. It's almost like we have a body of evidence of radiation equals not good, don't risk it, because it's bad. I'm having a really tough time accepting anything that you have to say right now. Not because I have anyone who has, in my close circle, experienced radiation issues whatsoever. To the contrary, I can't think of anyone who has had an issue. But I don't need to have personal connections to anyone who has had those issues. I just need to know Demon Core. I'm done. Don't ask me. It's dangerous. How much? Well, for that incident, yeah, much. For a regular radioactive area worker, different entirely. I don't even know if I ever heard the term linear no threshold before this video. The idea that has been presented by your channel constantly is that there is less danger than we have ever felt like, based off everything else that we have, that the general practice of handling radioactive materials, because of all the different things that we do to make sure it's done safely and within limits, in regards to the specific types of radiation that can happen in those occupations, we have made it so that there is a limit. The reason why, when you go and take an X-ray or take an MRI or take chemotherapy, and the reason why it really hurts your body, people can attest to that. I don't need to have anyone in my entire scope of my life have ever experienced radiation of chemotherapy to know that chemotherapy sucks, because there are so many cases of chemotherapy sucking. It's not okay. And for people who are immune deficient or whatever else, it becomes even less likely that you can even get chemotherapy because it will just overwhelm your whole body. And you will most likely end up falling ill to some sickness, which is not radiation causing it. Technically, it's just that radiation caused the stress, and then the stress caused all these different reactions of the body and whatever else. And then the other, because it's worked so hard to balance out whatever else is going on with it, the smallest thing comes in, and then it suddenly is very slight, is all it takes, and someone is dead. Is what everyone has understood for decades. So you're coming in here and you're saying that's not even close to any of it. Because when you look at a map, they talk about this map. Very important.
Today would look a little different. Like this. If you assume that any radiation is harmful, following the explosion in Ukraine, pregnant women across Europe, thinking that any amount of radiation is mutagenic, chose to save an entire generation of children with between 100,000 and 200,000 elective abortions. There is no fact that I know in this space that is as simultaneously heartbreaking and infuriating. The radiation rates that cause this panic do look terrifying on a map like this, if you don't know what you're looking at. Finland looks like it had something to worry about, right? Inside that scary orange blob of cesium-137? It's only scary if you don't know that the rate indicated is less than the background radiation rate in Finland. This community...
I'm sorry. I don't... This doesn't correlate whatsoever. What the hell kind of blackness does that color represent when it comes to Chernobyl versus Finland? It's slightly warm there. Oh, wow, warm. It's not black. So what are those ratings? I don't know. It's more like 10 to 40 and near 100 versus the radiation in Chernobyl is 10 times as much. Chernobyl. Freaking 10 times as much. I don't want to hear it. It's like, oh, you have these other places and they have... I don't even know what this relates to. Is it background? Is it like an incident? What happened? What is this?
Communication can only cause fear.
I don't know how to read this. I don't know what it refers to. I don't know why you're mentioning something about cesium 4 and what did you say? I don't know.
If you assume that any radiation is harmful, that linear no threshold is true. But we know it can't be. If we took this map and corrected its color scale so that only radiation rates above established threshold doses were shown, the colors on this map today would look a little different. Like this.
So as you can see, only Chernobyl was lit up with a color that was different. I better get off of this app.
What those mothers wouldn't have given for this image. There's one more lie about Chernobyl that deserves to be destroyed. Because linear no threshold extrapolates known cancer relationships at high doses all the way down to 0 dose, it calculates increases in cancer at low doses even if they would be too infrequent or literally impossible to observe. This extrapolation is called the collective dose. something that regulatory bodies actively use as a metric for risk. Dr. Robert Hargraves gives the example that
The idea of the collective dose is that if you have enough radiation in an area, because of the way it can interact differently, given enough people, there's the chances of it interacting in the way that is not preferred, lethally, or in some way that is health detrimental, meaning the collective amount of people as a whole have a greater chance of the thing going wrong in the way that's bad. But then it leads to
quote, regulators' LNT model predicts a worker legally exposed to 0.05 sieverts would have a 0.5% excess chance of cancer. Thus, by LNT proportionality,
there was some point where he talked about cups of coffee.
1,000 so exposed workers would have 5 excess cancers. This 50 millisievert calculation ignores established 100 millisievert threshold doses and slaps a risk on it anyway. And if you apply this extrapolated risk to enough people, you will get, by simple math, some scary-looking numbers. But of course,
there's also the whole idea of the universe is expanding in such a way that it's so many kilometers per megaparsec, and that the further out you go, stuff is moving away at light years. And that's not how physics works. The accordion stretches the same rate for its entire length, and the distant stuff is equally it's equally growing in those directions, but the distance between one rung, and I mentioned this with a bendy straw, one little fold in that bendy straw only moves a little bit, but it grows at that same rate. Versus the entire length moves an entire couple centimeters. A much vaster distance. Now you stretch that out to the galaxy, and like extreme light years and megaparsecs, whatever those numbers actually mean, it's massive, the size of the expanse of galaxy clusters and beyond into vast interstellar between multiple galaxy clusters amounts of space, or the entire billions of light years of distance for the entire galaxy, the entire universe, I mean. It's safe to assume that if it was a multiplying factor, that you would see things moving away at faster and faster speeds the further and further away you go. But anyone in a position, the thing is, the rate is consistent throughout all of the distances. So, like any chain moving a certain rate, the first piece of the chain moved the same rate as the last, but their total distance is not any bigger in that rate. Similarly, the universe is all moving in the same speed throughout. It is not a multiplying factor. So,
large dose to members of a small group is not equivalent to a small dose to members of a large group, even if the collective dose is the same. Using collective dose for radiation regulation is the same as saying something like this. The lethal median dose per kilogram for the caffeine in your coffee is 192 milligrams per kilogram. A 72 kilogram person would therefore have to have 138 cups of coffee to have a 50% chance of dying from caffeine toxicity. But that also means, linearly speaking, a 0.4 chance of dying per cup of coffee, right? And since over 1 billion people drink at least 1 cup of coffee every day, we should expect something like 4.8 million caffeine overdoses every single day. This is obviously ridiculous, but
Like, yeah, simply having a drop of caffeine or whatever else can't harm anyone if you were to really reduce the numbers. So you could multiply that drop to the point of infinity and end up with someone getting an overdose just because of the sheer number of people and the volume and whatever else. But that's not how volumetric stuff should be done. Per person is more important per whatever else.
it's exactly how you get the ridiculous estimates for fatal cancers in Chernobyl's liquidators. Up to 60,000 deaths among liquidators based on collective dose? That signal should have been pretty strong among the low-dose noise, shouldn't it? When you don't extrapolate with collective dose and instead do an analysis like this one that actually
Okay. Chemicals like coffee and an overdose is different than reactions. And I feel like you're missing a slight bit of nuance here, where I've already mentioned you could have a bunch of radiation passing through you all the time, every day, of whatever specific type. It's not going to do anything to you because it's just the neutrinos that go through the Earth all the time. They don't do anything. So there is no concern, even though it's happening all the time, for everyone. So instead, you need to consider the types of radiation. High energy particles is a specific type. It is different than UV radiation. It's different, which still has skin cancer type issues that can happen. So does that not just mean that we have, for people who are in those areas that can have higher UV radiation, don't they just have practices for how they handle the sun? And they work accordingly with it? So, considering the idea of different radiation types, energetic particles that permeate have, like the effect of a small bullet, can only do so much if they go through like the outer layer of the skin. Obviously they won't do anything because that's all dead anyway. If they go through your hair, that's not going to do anything. It's all dead anyway. But if they go through something like your eye, there's not a lot of evidence about that being a problem. Maybe. But we know we don't look in the sun anyway, so that's a totally different thing for a number of reasons. And it's possible that what he's trying to say is that the types of radioactive influences, because of how any given particle could give problematic effects, and usually with radioactive materials, the neutrons are shooting off at like thousands or millions per cubic centimeter or something. There's all sorts of things. I don't know. And it's in this study, in this video, it's very muddled, it's very generalized, and the information is very smeared out, where stuff like people near, for example, places with a lot of heat or infrared radiation, but with the correct um, gear, have no issues, or versus someone with just a slick of liquid on their hand, just putting their hand through some molten lava stuff as it pours. Like, apparently that's not an issue because the flash amount of heat exposure is so small that you're not going to do anything to yourself, especially since it's just the liquid that's on your hand that's going to make the steam, and then it doesn't actually transfer to your hand, is what it's been said. But I would say working in a nuclear reactor area is different than Chernobyl. It's different than work. Like, for example, there's a reason why in dentistry, for example, they don't allow people to be working in those radioactive X-ray areas while it's in operation. The people getting the X-rays are in there alone, and while it's passing through, the person who is operating the machine, who's going to be there more often and have exposures more often, are not in the room. They literally stay out of the room, and the rest of your body is protected by a lead vest designed specifically to make sure that your own exposure to the rest of your body is not higher than it needs to be. Obviously, there's no lead helmet, but we are protecting literally every other part of your body. But, like, it's directed at your teeth, and for whatever reason, the radiation has to have an entire vest in order to protect a person, and the operator has to be out of the room. Meaning, radiation exposure of this type, although it's not energetic particles, is completely different and completely damaging. And it's understood. And the amounts are regulated. Meaning there is an understood threshold. Like the amount of x-rays and everything else that a person can have throughout their lifetime. In a year, there's that limit. I don't know what it is, but it's there. Similarly, MRIs and other body, chest, like full body x-rays or whatever else, it's all regulated. So all of this thing that you're trying to express is that working at a nuclear facility can be very safe, is very safe, and absolutely it can be, with all the different safety precautions that have been in place to make sure that it doesn't take hold and it doesn't have the influence or potential And like, are we just being scared into thinking that the tooth rays don't need a body chest cover made of lead? Or is this a well-established science that's like, we know this is a problem? We know there are genuine concerns. And mutagenic stuff and all of that. Like, I don't think that the people in those areas are affected by the same types of radiation as chest x-rays or whatever else. I don't know what's going on with that. I don't know what all of this, a lot of this means or is about. With regards to things like specific of a tiny area and everything.
Would you like to join us for church?
Get away.
But it's not distributed equally. Some places on Earth have more uranium and or thorium in the ground. Some places are higher in elevation and therefore closer to the cosmic rays from space. Linear no threshold should say then that people living in extremely high background radiation areas like Colorado, India, China, Brazil, or Iran should have higher rates of cancer. Instead, Dr. Jeffrey A. Siegel notes that, quote, in contrast to LNT-based predictions, several high background radiation areas have the same or lower cancer rates compared with nearby areas.
It's curious. Because what if the damage is happening and then the body deals with it and they're used to it, they're adapted to it or something, that the rate of regeneration is considered and is higher. So if someone went from an area that is less radioactive into there, how would that affect them? Or vice versa, someone who went from there into somewhere less radioactive, like into a town or whatever else. Is it possible they could experience, and there's this whole idea of there could be radiation deficiency, that you actually need to have maybe a certain amount of radiation in your lifetime so your body can react to it, so it knows how to do it safely without overreacting or something, which can make some sense. There's issues with that logic still also. But it goes back to everything began with radiation bombarding the world from the sun and everything. I still feel like there's a nuance that's being missed here. Information being muddled, information being like, if it's true that regardless of the type of radiation, any amount of certain amounts of exposure can be fine, other amounts of exposure can be absolutely problematic. Whatever. The whole point of his video is probably to make it so that it would seem like working with nuclear radiation stuff in a reactor is safe, should be used for the power types that we would want to have instead of being scared of it. We've been scared too long, let's just wake up to reality and not be so paranoid. Not let fear get the better of us. I can't read this. It's interesting how you...
A linear no threshold
I made a picture where you zoom into one thing, and then from that you zoom into another thing, and from that you zoom into yet another thing. And this is that picture, but in regards to the scales of specific sized stuff. And it's like, wait, in comparison to the size of whatever this is how small things need to be effective of whatever thing. Eating one banana, for example.
context. This is meant
Symptoms of radiation poisoning received in short time. Like, all of this. Interesting to think about how it can go from being a banana to 10 minutes in Chernobyl reactor exclusion zone. So, banana multiplied by a factor of, is that millions or billions? And then you got Chernobyl. I don't care. CT scan. Right, is a level 2 type exposure of another order of magnitude bigger. The minimum yearly amounts and stuff, something. Be great if he actually went through this. And where the fuck am I going? I don't know. So I've been through this too long.
months. Everything makes a lot more sense. Dr. Robert Hargraves notices that intensive radiation doses of 100 millisieverts have a 100% safety record. A dose rate safety limit of 100 microsieverts per hour would be more scientifically defensible. The very first radiation standards were similarly higher. 80 microsieverts per hour was first suggested in 1934, and quote, "No one has been identifiably injured by radiation while working within the first numerical standard set by the NCRP. These numbers themselves are less important than the fact that they can be orders of magnitude higher than current recommendations, making the low doses of radiation most of us experience every day far less scary and more understandable. I can honestly tell you that poring over this data has completely changed how I reflect on the rates I experienced in Chernobyl and Fukushima. I would view them entirely differently today, and I would change the tone of my videos if I was making them now.
Huh? So you're saying you didn't get anything there? Like it's the same as walking in your backyard? What are you trying to say there, buddy?
Given the significant amount of evidence in support of higher radiation limits and hormesis, Dr. Lucky even supported the idea that you could in fact be radiation deficient, that you could actually need more radiation in your life, not less. But even setting aside this more bombastic claim, it seems very clear from everything we've gone through so far.
Oh, there's nothing wrong with that claim. The amount of potential, if there is damage caused by radiation, and then your body's ability to react to it and just have it be a normal thing that it knows how to do, is there is potential there. And then if there is, in fact, well, obviously, people have a regeneration factor. People regrow their entire bodies over the course of 4 years. So it's just in all sorts of different places, everywhere, all different times. And so, for example, having something bad in your pocket, and it's the same pocket for a prolonged period of time, with radiation spewing into your body from it, is more likely to give you something in the area relative to the pocket. It all depends. And that's much higher than natural, just everywhere else radiation, background radiation, whatever. In conclusion, the first thing that bothered me was to say that there was no health whatsoever issues, or that, like, personally, I think that his ideas in the Chernobyl videos that he made was that, oh, it's not as scary as everyone says it is. He's been saying this whole time. I don't understand what would be different. If it's already not scary, could he just say there is no concern? Because it's handled properly, because everyone does their part to make sure that it's not mishandled. Radiation doesn't get too much, become too big of a problem. Whatever. I know what you're trying to accomplish. I just feel like there are certain statements that are a little bit far. Other statements that, ironically, you just said that we're overreacting about certain things, and then radiation could be a benefit in small doses, but there's science to that, and I would love it if you didn't skip over that. And if you knew, but that's the thing. It's like a certain amount of wine is good for your heart or whatever. You know? Red wine specifically. Because of whatever else and how it does things with your heart or whatever. Something, something. Like, you don't want to have wine all the time, but some throughout your lifetime, in a given amount of time, is apparently beneficial. Not knowing what that number is or anything else like that. And most people have associations with wine related to the behavioral aspects. My parents definitely do. My mom definitely does. So wine, alcohol, and whatever else is very abstained by them, but I have no problem drinking because I don't have that kind of trauma and association with it, because I also don't have that kind of behavioral stuff. I can drink and not have a behavior, uh, like I'm not an angry drunk. I'm not an abusive person when I'm drunk, or whatever else. I'm, then again, I've never been, I never had the amount of be drunk enough to have a mental whatever. I've been tired enough to have a mental whatever, but not drunk enough. Like, that's not the thing in my life. So I can't understand. Like, the thing is, drunk and angry and things, and if they were simply to not have, is a different thing for another video, but I would say that people who get angry while drunk and whatever else, and it's possible that there are entire mental structures inside of how their brain works and handles everyday life and the concepts of reality whatsoever that depicts how they are when they are intoxicated. That it's not about the alcohol whatsoever, but it's about their mental framework that makes them that susceptible to that. So people with the a better mental framework will not have problems drinking, leading to them being abusive whatsoever. It's possible that people can just be sane even if they're drunk. Or whatever. So the amount of exposure, the type of exposure, the way that it affects you, the types of things that all take into account, and like smoking or whatever else, carcinogenic and radiation. I don't understand. Everyone has carbon dioxide. It's a part of air that you breathe out. So carcinogens or carbon-based issues, whatever, blah, 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 blah. Whole other thing. Not something that I feel correlates well or whatever. It's so freaking weird. So unfortunately, I don't have a lot of notes on how to improve this video so it doesn't. My brain right now, I probably have said all the things that I need to say in the video, but I can't synopsis. I can't like recap. I don't know what it would be that I would give you advice more than what I've already said about you are possibly having the wrong type of ideas or the wrong understanding of radiation and how it works. Like the radiation of the local area stuff is different, I believe. There, and it's important to know all those different nuances. It's important to know all those different types. So like the stuff that is alpha, beta, gamma, or the friggin' particle type, all different. 100% all of them are different, can have different effects, could have similar effects. And it's important to know all of that information. And a lot of this video is filler, or things that aren't in my head proof enough, or understanding enough, or the correct information. And it's a lot of gaps, it's a lot of things where it's like, oh, that one thing, oh, he mentioned you could have a benefit. Why would you not? Why would you not have that be part of the video in detail? That's probably the most impactful thing in this whole thing, and yet you just skim over it. It's weird. Whatever. Keep. I hope we all just put in the right amount of effort and actually develop it so that we have less scared for the wrong reasons and concern and everything else for the right reasons. And that, yeah.